households. We did not create enough housing for the people who are coming into our community. That is a key piece for us to understand, because that means moving on up, that means that puts pressure on all the other, all housing. It puts pressure on all housing when we don't have enough, right? Particularly puts pressure on the affordable housing that we'll be talking about later today. So just a big framing, we don't have enough housing, all right? Also, not a surprise, we hear folks talk about that. Now this might be one that's helpful for you to look at on your tables. I've included those, and thanks to John for sharing this graphic above. This really helps us understand the types of housing that we produce, right? And many of us would say, well, is homeless shelter housing? Well, it is built, and it is not permanent, but it is housing of a sense, it's shelter in a sense, right? So these are the kinds of, this is the range of housing that we build. Can anyone point out, and here I'll just speak these out, homeless shelter, permanent supportive housing with services, affordable rental housing, permanently affordable home ownership, so a community land trust. Bracket that, we won't have time to get into that, but that's an interesting conversation in our community. Affordable home ownership, market rate rental, and market rate home ownership. All right, can anyone say the type, what color is the housing that we're doing at Caldwell? Which one of those are we doing at Caldwell? Does anyone know? Orange, that's right. That's right, we are working toward permanent supportive housing. Important to know that there are other kinds of affordable housing, right? So we're not solving we're not trying to address the entire affordable housing continuum. There are many kinds of affordable housing. We're short in all of them, but the permanent supportive housing is really for folks who otherwise would be in shelter, right? And there's some more specifics to understanding what permanent supportive housing serves, and Joe might speak a little bit more about those. But important to know that we're also seeing some affordability issues now in higher incomes, right? So even folks with moderate incomes are struggling with housing costs. And if you'll go back for just a second, Joe. That's okay. Thank you for being my clicker. So these categories, extremely low income, very low income, are actually categories that are given to us by HUD, the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. And that kind of sets the limits, the income limits on how we kind of plan and understand what kind of housing we have for our communities. And so at the extremely low income, you'll see an individual makes around $20,000 a year. All right, just to kind of put that in perspective, a full year of salary at minimum wage is about $15,000 a year. So our extremely low income threshold is still making a little bit above minimum wage, right? The threshold of that. And then you'll see it goes up to very low income for an individual is $33,000. So we talk about Fight for 15, right? Fight for 15, the $15 wage. That only gets you about double of that, around $30,000, right? So still, this effort we have to create living wages is still at a low income level, all right? These are, you'll hear people talk about area median income. We'll come back and we'll perhaps create a good dictionary for folks. But that is how we come up with those numbers. It's a percentage of our median income for the area. All right, so that's where those numbers come from. All right, next slide. So we say something is affordable when a person is spending, or a household is spending, no more than 30% of their income on housing and utilities. All right, 30%. If you're spending over that, we consider you cost burden. That's the HUD name. Again, U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development. Cost burden. If you're spending over 50% of your pay in housing and utility costs, We call that severe cost burden. So we know that in our community, 47% of our renters are cost burden. They're spending more than what is affordable. And I don't have the exact stat on the 50%, but we also know that 95% of the folks who are making the least amount of money are cost burdened, right? So important to understand how much a family can afford. All right, next slide. So that means your max rent that you should be paying, if you are a single individual for a 1-bedroom, is $495. If you are a family, it's $706, right? And you can kind of see the different income levels there. So my guess is you're already seeing an issue, right? How many of you all know of places in Charlotte that rent for that? Right. All right, next slide. So we know that there are 23,000 households in Charlotte. We know that we need 23,000 units of housing in Charlotte for that extremely low income bracket. 23,000 units of housing, yes.
Does that only take care of the current people, or does that allow for some growth?
That's really talking about household, like we're comparing the units we have to the households in that bracket, and that's right now. Or it's within a year actually, if you actually look at when the data are collected. Next slide. So you can actually see, and this one might be helpful for you to look at on your packets as well, because it's really tiny up there. But you can also see that that is only the gap in the extremely low income bracket. We also have gaps in the very low income bracket of 16,000 units. We have a gap in the low income bracket of about 2,000 units and 20,000 in the moderate income bracket. We have an affordable housing problem, right? It consistently presses on people who are closer to the margins for a variety of reasons, and it is a push factor into homelessness. So let's think about this one more way. Next slide. And I can talk about those up arrows and down arrows. What those really mean is a lot of folks end up having to rent up. The up arrows is they have to go into a higher cost bracket to get housing, pay more than they should be. And then there are some people who are renting down, so they're going into a lower price bracket than they can afford. And that's often because there's not enough housing that exists in their bracket, right? So again, we're missing housing across the spectrum. We're really missing it in these affordable to moderate spaces. So $377 a month. That is what you should be paying in rent if you make minimum wage. $377 a month. All right? Right. Right. And it's important to know that in no county in the United States of America, can you rent a 2-bedroom apartment on minimum wage? No county. Not even the most rural. There's no county in the United States of America where you can rent an apartment for what you should be paying at minimum wage. Push factor. This is pushing people who are on the margins into homelessness, right? Push factor. Next slide. Just looking a little bit deeper. You can kind of see, and this is another one that might be helpful for you to look at in your packet. $377 down there, and here is the median gross rent, and this has been adjusted for inflation, so you might say, wait, that looks a little high. That looks a little low for what I see out in the community, but it's been adjusted. And that is actually a 2019 number, so I think that has gone up since. But you can kind of see a median rent and what someone with minimum wage can afford. Right? Next slide. And low-cost rentals dropped from 45% to 22% of our total rental stock in Charlotte-Mecklenburg. All right, 45 to 22%, 2019 numbers. Anyone want to venture a guess what the 2021 numbers are? It dropped. I'll give you that hint. 13%. 13% of our rental housing stock is available. It rents for under $800. 13%. Now, I think we know that more than 13% of our population actually needs housing that's more affordable than that, right? All right. Next slide. All right, so what does this mean? This means if you are working minimum wage, you have to work 108 hours a week at minimum wage in order to afford our median rent. Or you have to make about $20 an hour a week in order to afford it. Again, 5 for 15, it was great, it's better, it's not enough. And we are one of the more moderately priced housing markets in the country, right? This is housing related. We got an affordable housing problem, and next slide, homelessness is a housing issue. Now, next slide. Housing market and policies explain homelessness more than individual vulnerabilities. Now, that does not mean individual vulnerabilities aren't important and don't need to be addressed. That is not what I'm saying. But when social scientists and economists look at homelessness across this country, the thing that is in common is housing markets. There's a great book out right now called Homelessness is a Housing Issue. I'll make sure it gets put on a list. And again, once we get our website up and going, you can go to that. It's a relatively short book that you can take a look at. But it really kind of breaks down these myths that we have a huge housing problem in California because the weather's warm. Housing's expensive. Right? So this is the biggest push factor into homelessness. All right? Next slide. So, what causes homelessness? And this is where I want us to sit for a little bit. All right? What causes homelessness? So, we're going to come to the individual factors in a second. But what I really want us to sit with is how these systemic factors, like the housing market, like housing policies, have interacted with other systemic factors to craft that push, right? And what we know is it's these systemic factors, particularly housing, particularly cuts or just not keeping up with what our population needs, right? Particularly those things is what's pushing us, is what has created homelessness to the size that we see it. Individual factors describe who's more vulnerable, who's more at risk to becoming homeless. But it does not, you can't say that a person who has a serious and persistent mental health issue is homeless just because of that. There are more people housed who have serious and persistent mental health issues than there are people who are homeless with serious and persistent mental health issues. The causal factor is not the mental health issue. It's a risk factor. It's something that we need to wrap more services around folks who have serious and persistent mental illness. But it's not the reason, right? It's a risk factor. And I know that's getting into teasing out a little bit of our scientific language there, but that's really important for us to understand. Because we would probably still have people at risk and struggling with mental health issues, but far few of them homeless if we had a better system of housing to support them, right? And we can think about that in terms of the same across these individual factors. Substance use. We really can establish in research if we know that people who are homeless their greater percentage of them struggle with substance use and abuse, right? However, it's a chicken and egg thing. Did they become homeless and then start to use substances? Or did they use substances and then become homeless? It varies, and it is not a clear causal factor. Education levels. Even in those situations, we connect education levels to income. But again, think about that litmus test. There are still more people with low education levels that are housed than there are people with low education levels who aren't. All right, so next slide. Oh, can you go back one more? Sorry. Thank you. I want us to pay attention how racism and exclusion are running through all of these factors, right? And particularly on that systemic factor side. There is a reason that housing policy, I'm going to kind of ask for a raise of hands here. How many folks have spent time learning about redlining? All right, right. So there are structural reasons, the housing market and who benefits from home ownership and even can rent in spaces. There are reasons that is, there are different outcomes for different races on that, right? Same thing with all of these larger systemic factors. Labor policy protections excluded, does anybody know this? Farm workers and housekeepers, yes, hospitality. Early labor protections when people were also building their wealth alongside of mortgages that went to, that were 98% of our mortgages until 1969 went to white people, right? So at that same time, the same protections that allowed some of our families to build wealth did not allow other families to do that, right? So criminal justice policies. We've probably talked about the inequitable sentencing between crack and powder cocaine, right? There's so many things that we could go in each of these, but what you see kind of laced through all of those factors is systemic racism and exclusion. And we could pop them out and we could spend a day on each of these themes, popping out how exclusion works and discussing those further. All right? All right, next slide. Yes, Jennifer.
One other thing under supportive services
Yeah.
is the healthcare system.
Great.
Many people have a healthcare incident and hundreds of thousands of dollars, health insurance, and end up homeless also.
Absolutely. Thank you for bringing up supportive services, healthcare, mental health care. That's right. Our systems leave people in the gap. Disproportionately, they leave people of color in the gap, right? And so paying attention to that. So here's what I'd like us to do. Thank you, Jennifer. The other thing to note is welfare reform, right? Under a Democratic president. So this can be a nonpartisan issue we're talking about here. There were cuts made to programs under Republicans and cuts made to key programs under Democrats as well. Welfare reform was also happening as we were losing housing stock and as we were not keeping up with our housing needs. And so the entitlement programs that people were using to keep themselves stable also started to disappear. Another kind of push factor that combined. Okay, here's what I want you to do. We're going to take 5 minutes, and I want you to spend some time at your tables thinking about why do you think we spend a lot of time focusing on individual characteristics of people experiencing homelessness, right? I want you to sit with that. Why do you think we spend a lot of time talking about individual characteristics of people who experience homelessness? And what are the risks of such a narrow focus? All right? All right, 5 minutes. And maybe choose someone from your table to share one thing out.
That's a great answer, a great article we referenced. We actually did a little
Yes, that's
podcast
good.
about it, but I love that because she brings up those same issues that it's not about climate, it's not about
Yep.
more people.
Yep.
She just nails it on the house.
take one more minute.
So that what Edward, other son got here. He said, run on the way. I said, yeah, right. Friends. Yeah.
Okay, all right, let me call you back. Does any table have something they would like to share? Robbie? No, that's okay.
Talk loud.
Okay.
Loud enough?
I will restate for the group too.
We see this largely as it's easier to blame individuals, and it's also less overwhelming to think about, oh, we need, if we fix an individual person, we can think about that, but these systems are huge.
Yes.
And as individuals, we think, how can we possibly tackle those, and where do we start?
Yeah, absolutely. I think those are two really important things to pay attention to. One is it's just easier to blame individuals. Tell me that you said easier to blame individuals and overwhelming. Yes. Yes. And so many of you all may know that I'm a social work faculty member. And when I was teaching full time, that was one of the key things I heard from students, because I always taught the macro classes, social policy classes. Those bigger is, I don't even know, I'm going to do clinical work because I don't know how to do this. It's hard, right? Not impossible, but it's hard. It's harder work, it's long-term work, but that's right. So sometimes it's hard for us to do it. Yeah. Another group, yes?
Yeah, well, our group had similar thoughts that it's just easier to blame the individual. Also, you don't have to feel responsible. You don't have to feel guilty.
Responsibility and guilt.
Blame the individual.
Yes.
And then also, since the systems are so skewed racially and historically, changing the systems will require a lot of work and a lot of difficult work on our own perceptions. And we avoid that. We don't want to do that work. And we also, those of us who are privileged and have homes, stand to lose something possibly.
Yes. Yes, I'm going to note just a couple of things. That last piece of those of us who have homes may stand to lose something. I'm going to just plant this as a seed for folks to hold on to. It is a complex line of research, but it's really important, and if you want to read about it on a regular kind of, instead of having to get into the weeds of housing economics, you can read in Atlantic and an author named Jerusalem Dimsas, and she talks about Hello? Okay, I'm back. She talks about this kind of issue about those of us who own homes, particularly in, let's say, opportunity wedge neighborhoods around the center of the city, into the wedge of wealth, South Park, Ballantyne. We benefit from housing scarcity. And what Jerusalem Dimsos does is she asks us to think about this kind of local control issue, right? So we think of that as such an important part of our democratic process. But do you know who actually does that? Jennifer could probably tell us. It's older white people are the folks who show up. And it's often older white people who are homeowners, who show up to say, nope, no affordable housing in my neck of the woods. No housing, not just affordable housing, but no housing. I don't want a luxury apartment by me, not more, I don't want any of that by me. Yeah, it's really important. I'll make sure we link to that too so folks can dig into her work. It's hard, it's complex. I think there's some ways that we could think critically about that, but I think that's a really good point of awareness for this congregation to think about the ways that we benefit from the system as status quo. Yeah. Jerusalem Dimsos, Demsas. Huh?
Did you say it was in the Atlantic?
The Atlantic, yep. Yes, Linda.
So, our table touched on several of those things. In addition, we've talked about the older white folks who don't want them in their neighborhood. A lot of it, I think, from my perspective, is that what we work with. A lot of it is what I was taught as a child.
Yeah, so we have this kind of ethos of everybody should be able to pull themselves up by their bootstraps. We don't, and it's in our water, people. It's in our water to where even blame individuals is the phrase we use, right? Individual factors are important. I may need mental health care. You may need mental health care. All of those pieces are about all of us. But when it comes to people in difficult situations in life, we put a blame frame on there, right? They just didn't work hard enough. And there are systems, you brought up some of the systems this morning that keep people from doing that. Yeah.
A couple of things. One is I think we have to look at capitalism because the top people in any company can take all the money and not pay the workers what they're worth. That's a big issue.
Yep, we heard about that this morning.
And also that blame game means that we don't have to do anything.
Yeah.
We're not responsible. The system didn't do it. You did it. You're the problem, and so you fix it.
Yeah.
And but to me, that means there's no sense of community. There's no sense of that we're in this together, and we need to do something together to help whoever needs help.
Yeah. Thank you.
Can you repeat it for people?
Yes, the capitalism and the way that kind of separates us. I'm trying to I hope I'm getting you, Pat. And it just becomes easier to blame people. I hope I captured most of that. Yep.
Well, of course, I can bring into politics. But part of the structure, part of the problem of changing the system is that we don't have local control in Charlotte. So if we wanted to add a person to the library board, we had to ask Raleigh to give us permission for something as simple as adding someone to the library board of trustees. And we have to ask them to do anything. And many times, if we do something without asking, we get punished. And so we can't do inclusionary zoning, we can't do impact fees, all these things that other communities, other parts of the country who are still challenged have been able to do politically. The other aspect of it is that we have the people who are profiting, the developers, are putting money into campaigns. And so the people who could vote to change something have gotten so much support and money from the housing folks and the developers that they're not willing to make a change. So so I had to ask political aspect.
Anytime, Jennifer. Any other thing that didn't come up at a table that someone really that we didn't already talk about, someone really wants to share? Yeah, thank you. We'll get the mics next time.
Yeah, I hear a lot of talk, and talk is good. You got to talk before you do. But yeah, I propose that we conduct a scientific research how to leverage technology and help address homelessness, regardless of the rule structure that regulate how this can and cannot be done at the intersection of solar collection and generation of sheltered space.
We've got a great research question, and I think you should write it down and let it sit with us, because I won't be able to answer that one today. Yeah, thank you all very much. So we're going to go ahead and move on so we can get to the rest of the program, but thank you to everyone and for that kind of feedback. I think one of the main things I wanted us to take from that is and we captured it. It's in the water that we tend to, for good and bad reasons, right? We've been told, oh, it's their fault if you're not wealthy. Protestant work ethic, folks, that's rooted in the church. We've been taught it's their fault if they're not wealthy, right? And it's also easier to start with an individual than the system sometimes, right? So there are reasons, both that we should be questioning critically, but there are reasons that we end up focusing more on individuals. But what are we missing when we do that, right? That's the risk. The politics, the larger capitalistic structure. Some of those are huge and can't be fixed. Can they be changed? They were written at some point, they can be changed. Is it incremental sometimes? Sure. But when we're only focusing on fixing an individual, we often miss that bigger picture of what's actually pushing people into this experience, right? Okay, next slide. All right, so I've said all that about individual versus system, and now I want to hone in on the fact that housing is super important for the individual, right? It is the foundation by which any of us wellness. Hello. Okay. This poor little scarf will never look the same. We refrigerate our medicine. We take sanctuary at home. We find safe. How to love and be loved at home, right? It's the foundation for so much of our wellness. For us, for people who have not had for wellness. And so that's really important as well. So next slide, please. So these are just, and I'm just going to list this, and you can go look at the whole long study if you'd like. Housing First Charlotte-Mecklenburg was an effort that was 2016 to 2020, and now continues in the ongoing work of the community that tried to work to end chronic homelessness, right? The same population that we're going to serve here at Caldwell. And I was lucky enough, blessed enough to be able to lead the study of it. And here's what we found. And honestly, folks, this is not rocket science, right? It's just the ability to document it systematically, right? Once you're housed, better quality of life. Once you're housed, reduce trauma symptoms. It doesn't fix everything, but it reduces them. Once you're housed, improve mental health on average. Once you're housed, this is going to surprise people because in Housing First, where you are allowed to continue, it's called a harm reduction program. But even in the harm reduction programs, there were less people drinking to intoxication after they were housed, right? And that doesn't mean people don't still struggle with substance use. They do. People in housing keep struggling with substance use. But it is a definite improvement, a documented improvement. Fewer nights in shelter, obviously. Fewer people arrested, fewer people incarcerated, fewer health department visits, and fewer emergency department visits, right? Housing people works. Housing and then wrapping the right services around them works. That's what Housing First is. That's what that was studying. It works. Is it easy? Nope. Is it going to get someone fixed immediately? Nope. Recovery, mental health recovery, substance use recovery, those are all long roads, right? With many ways, and people know this because you may know of someone, you may yourself be struggling with either one or both of those, right? Those are hard recovery paths. You just do it housed, right? Okay, next slide. Okay, a few basics about homelessness, and then I'm going to turn this over to Joe. This is called the one number, and that is on, at the end of December 31st, 2022, that was the total number of people actively homeless and in need of housing and services. This is not the same thing as the point in time count that you just heard about. That happens on one night and allows us to really understand our unsheltered as well as the people who are sheltered. This is called the one number, and it pulls from information systems all over the community, from outreach, from programs that are serving homeless people. All right, so that's down a bit from the pandemic. It also only counts one definition of homelessness, right? It only counts homelessness as it is defined by HUD, that either in a shelter or living in a place not meant for human habitation, right? So that's all that's counting. There are other kinds of things that we would also probably consider homeless, and the education system does. So you're doubled up, you're sleeping on a sofa, couch surfing with family or friends, you're living in a hotel. Those aren't in this number. It would swell if it is. So we know that this is an undercount, right? But this is the number that we can look at. You can go to the website at the county and check it every month and see what that number is. It's updated every month, all right? And here's how that number breaks down. 1,800 of those folks are single adults. That means they're homeless on their own. That doesn't mean they're not part of families. That doesn't mean they're not in relationships. It just means they're counted homeless on their own, all right? That's okay. 853 people in families. That is typically a single woman and with children, right? 104 unaccompanied youth. And let me just say, and we'll get to this slide in a second, in all of these categories, Black individuals are overrepresented compared to the population. In the unaccompanied youth category, LGBTQ youth are overrepresented. All right, we can, as we go, we can dig into that. Yeah.
When it says 18 to 24 in such circle, does that mean there aren't people below the age of 18?
Yes, that is the number that HUD counts. I'm not sure. That's a really good question about where the younger children end up. I don't know if we have them that are actually that we know of. If it was not in that number, so that's a good question. I can check into that. But yes, that unaccompanied youth. I think the big piece of that is we don't often think of youth as folks over 18, but in HUD language, 18 to 24 is youth, young adult.
Younger children are included in the people in families.
Oh, okay. Thank you, Joe, very much. Forget that you're back there. 518 of those folks are chronically homeless. That's the population that we will be serving. And then 223 are veterans. All right. Next slide. 77% of the people experiencing homelessness in Charlotte-Mecklenburg identify as Black or African American. Next slide. All right, so if things were equitable, these bars, the gray bars and the green bars would be the same. The green bars tell you, the green bars are folks who are African American, or the green bar is the racial group in each one, sorry. But if it was equitable, those would line up the same, right? That means that the same risk in and out of homelessness for racial groups. Black individuals, African American individuals, families, are at a higher risk of becoming homeless, all right? We go back to talking about these patterns of racial exclusion, right? And so that's what I'd like us to do for a few minutes at our tables. Next slide. I want us to think about the things we've learned in this congregation, right? And redlining, some of the other pieces of information that you have. And I want us to take about 5 minutes to think about why homelessness is disproportionately experienced by Black people in our community and nationally. And then I really want you to think about the flip side of that question too, right? Why is it not experienced disproportionately by white people? All right, think, and if it helps you to start on that last question, start there. What is it that protects white people from experiencing homelessness, the risk of homelessness, at the same level? Think about both of those. Any follow-up questions? All right, 5 minutes. Okay, where are we time-wise?
What's that? Yeah, 1:35.
Check, test.
You're the broadcaster. I know you know what you're doing, so.
Hello? Testing, testing. This is such hard stuff, isn't it?
Well, it shouldn't be.
I know, but
What we
I've
thought
never,
was a simple system. It's in the box back there. Your content's outstanding. Excellent, excellent, excellent. Hey, James. Good. How are you? Thanks for being here. We'll get you up there in a minute. Yeah, now I turned that one off.
Testing, yep. All right, so I think we're going to try to do a little bit of feedback on this one by passing the microphone, hopefully. So is there any group who would like to share thoughts that you talked about at your table? Kelton.
So that's good. Well, like I was discussing with our table, I think like nowadays they don't have the definition of equality, the concept of it thought up right in their head. Because like I was telling Jeff, I said, man, he could go somewhere with the same exact background, same exact resources, same exact statement, same exact everything, but he would be choosing over me just because of my skin color.
Mm-hmm.
But it's the same way though if you look at the LGBTQ way, or you look at women. Women get paid less than men do at most jobs just because they're women. So that's what I think it's like equality thing is really mind-boggling to me.
Thank you, Kelton. Yeah, discrimination still exists, systemic racism, systemic exclusion. Yes. Anyone else? Carol.
Well, we talked about how all of us as white people had resources along the way, even if our families were rather modest.
That's right.
And for a lot of us, our parents grew up during the Depression, and there was not a lot to go around. But there had been some type of accumulated wealth, and it's that white advantage. And what Jessica was talking about this morning about lack and lack of education. And it just goes back so far that it's so culturally entrenched. But lack of resources, you can just take them for granted. So, take your resources for granted. And anyway, that's what we talked about.
Yeah, thank you. The white safety net in this country does not have as many holes as the black safety net, right? When you hit rock bottom, there's generational wealth, even if it's modest. My family is very modest as well, right? There is this wellspring, I would say, of opportunity. even from modest beginnings. Yes, Felicia.
That's exactly what we were saying, because what white folks tend to have is each other, and we're only one generation into having anything. You have each other and many generations to build on, and I'm very much a part of the first generation in my family to ever have anything. So when everyone in my family comes to me, I don't have nearly as much to draw on as you would have for each other.
Yeah, and as the mic is coming, thank you, Felicia. And even for those of us who are of the first generations of white families to have things, I'm a first generation college student. When my grandfather died, he left a modest estate. Thanks to the generosity of my mother, that became part of my down payment to buy a home. You know, Depression era, never wealthy, right? So even in, even in those kind of modest situations, thank you, Jessica.
I was gonna say, going back to what I said this morning, because, am I here? You here? Oh. Got to eat it.
Eat the mic.
Like what I was saying this morning, when I moved in at 4 years old with this household, 2-bedroom house, minimum 10 kids,
right?
5 adults, and it was chaotic.
Yeah.
There's not enough room for anything or anybody.
That's right.
There wasn't bathrooms, you know, just the outhouse. And my grandfather was a sharecropper, so it was like everybody that did have a job was working. They were taking junk, mess off the white man, and so when they came back home, the chaos really began because they done took junk all day, and the only persons and people that they got to get rid of their feelings on is their family. So it was like just an ongoing, because they didn't dare talk back to the white man.
Yeah.
So, and that kind of helps you with today with the kids. You know, the kids killing the kids because nobody respects them, nobody looks up to them. Everybody is, my son was saying earlier, and like the young man said back there, if he and Jeff went somewhere, Jeff was gonna get the benefit before him. So my son was like, why is there such a disdain for black people? And again, going back to that family that I lived with, at my home where I was, it was like, wow, because it was a 3-bedroom and we were comfortable. I didn't know black. But then when I got in this house with these people, I was really bottom of the totem pole, and my skin was so much lighter. So as a result of that, I slept on the floor for 12 years. You know, so who the black people have to get back at is the black people, because they can't do it to anybody else. And it's like it just, it's
Thank
awful.
you. Thank you for sharing that. And I think one of the things that we'll talk about, particularly in fourth quarter, is trauma and how those experiences really build and find their way out in life, right? And we will certainly, trauma is a persistent across our population, but particularly among people who've experienced poverty, combat, interpersonal violence. So we'll talk about trauma as we go through this preparation period. And then the other thing I want to know just about wealth, and Felicia, back to the comment you made, often those first generations of black family members who have wealth, guess what they do? They help their parents, and they help their grandparents, and they help their cousin. And honestly, I don't have to do that in the same way, right? I don't have to help my parents. They've built their retirement up. I don't have to worry about that in the same way because the system has functioned for them a little bit differently. And so that's a huge thing to pay attention to as we think about wealth creation and what people end up paying right? All right, yeah.
I was just gonna say, I think we all know this number because we've talked about it from the pulpit a number of times, but everybody probably knows the wealth gap in America. For every $10 in white wealth, there is what per black?
Yep. I'll put we just updated that study, so I'll put that up on our things as well. Okay, so the next slide, thank you all for that. Next slide, and I'm actually not going to go into this because I want Joe to have time and I want us to go through. We'll come back to this slide. This is a graphic that you can take with you and that we'll send out, and it's really about how to recognize homelessness and housing instability and housing stability as a continuum, right? And to kind of see where services are in our community. I don't want to take the time to go through all the details of this, but we'll come back to that again at a later time. What I would like to do is introduce Joe Hamby to you, who is going to take us through what the services that Roof Above provides, and also anything else you would like to add.
Okay. First of all, thank you. This is exciting, and I just want to say just a huge appreciation for this community of faith, because you are really on the forefront of a faith and housing movement that's only in its infancy stage, but you're there. And you're going to be one of those teaching communities for other communities to learn from just this process. And I'm just really excited to be a part of the learning. I'm the Director of Community Education at Roof Above. And it really should be Director of Community Learning, because I am a learner among learners. And I really want to emphasize that, because I am standing in the presence of Lori Thomas, and I know about this much. I mean, I know she has more knowledge in her pinky than I do in my entire brain width. So I'm just grateful to be here and to learn from her today, as you were learning from her today. So it's just an exciting, and I am going to be here a long time, longer than you want. You'll get tired of seeing my face, but I'm excited because I really believe this can serve as our learning process this year. Think about that. Our learning process this year can really be a template for other communities of faith as they're responsibly going through this same process of preparing, because you're doing this in such a responsible way and without any blinders on. So I think it's just a beautiful thing that you're a part of. And I'm excited because I really see us being able to share this kind of learning with other communities of faith. Say, how did you do that? And how did you come along in that process to where you were able to have a successful opening to this? So anyway, I am with Roof Above. I was embedded in the emergency shelters for 10 years. And just right there in the thick of things with our guests at our emergency shelters, but not looking at the 30,000-foot level. So I could tell you lots of stories, personal stories of folks that I have journeyed alongside, and just constantly amazed at what they have overcome. In fact, many times will bring you to tears. Someone just sitting with me in my office, and you're going, wow, the fact that you're alive. The fact that you're alive and smiling and hopeful and future directed just brings me to tears. So again, I have been in that aspect of what we have done, and this is new to me. So we are Roof Above, and for many people, we assume everyone knows that, but we're the product of a merger 3 years ago between the Men's Shelter of Charlotte, where I worked for much of that time, and the Urban Ministry Center. Our current CEO, Liz Clayson Kelly, who you've heard from on more than one occasion. She worked at both settings. We probably should have seen it in the cards that this was going to happen, because she saw that we are better together, and that's what we are. We are better together. And we did that for 3 reasons, really to have a greater impact, a greater understanding, everything from street outreach, which was happening at the Urban Ministry Center, all the way to permanent supportive housing, and then in between there, our Mercy Shelter system. We provide shelter to over 500 men every single night of the year. We have never closed. We have had to pivot in very quick order, but we have never closed our doors to anyone. But again, for greater impact, for voice, Jennifer was so great to add that political comment, and that's where we have to, as an organization, understand our role in advocacy and political advocacy, and that's really a huge growing edge that my boss is putting a lot of pressure on me right now to grow in as well. So we are, and then also bringing things to scale. So let's keep, next slide. Oh, I'm so glad to be able to say, next slide, please. Is your finger fast enough? But anyway, just gives you very quickly, because I don't want to take away from our great panel here, just very quickly, we do everything from street outreach. Our numbers are really low right now. We are at a place of really advocating for increased funding, not just for affordable housing needs in Charlotte, but actually to provide for before you get to affordable that place, we need more funding for that. Our street outreach, our day services center, you can walk onto our property at 945 North College Street. We don't ask for your ID, anything like that. Please come, let's see how we can assist you. Again, I said we provide 500 plus shelter beds a year. Room in the inn. Every night of the week, we need more communities of faith, but our communities of faith are aging and shrinking. I used that term shrinkling last week. We're wrinkling and shrinking, and we call it shrinkling. And because of that, our Room in the Inn program is really challenged to provide the kind of to open our places of worship for our unhoused neighbors. We provide employment services, as I did for most of my time there, and also we're in the. And obviously, we believe that a safe, stable, dignified place to call home is something that everyone is deserving of, without question, no questions asked. And so we believe that there's a solution to homelessness, and that's housing. And so we're in the transitional, short-term supportive and permanent supportive housing next, really quickly. And some of what we've done, got a lot of, if you know my boss, she's got more things in her imagination whirring around than I know about right now. But and so we have a lot of projects in the works. But we're really proud to say that we were able to, and it's called an adaptive reuse project, where we took an old hotel that was doing no one any good over on Clanton Road, and now we're proud to say that SECU's Southeastern Credit Union, a major supporter of this endeavor. The Rise on Clanton has been open since last year, providing 88 efficiency size apartments, and I think even more importantly, community. And you said it so well. You said it so well, Lori. It just the fact of that's the beauty of looking over here at this building and seeing what can happen over here. Because just in there are men that I have seen that were living in shelter two years ago, and I run into them over at the Rise on Clanton, and just in a matter of months, the change is. Sometimes I don't even recognize who I'm speaking to, and I had to catch myself. That's so and so, and I knew them when they were staying in emergency shelter or outside our shelters, and just to change. So housing is health care, and you said it so well in that slide. How many things are affected just by the nature of housing is change. And finally, we were excited. Opened in 2020 to, during the pandemic, we had nothing to do, and Liz always has fun sharing, and we were able to, with the benefit of a lot of different partners, a very complicated process to be able to purchase Hill Rock Estates over at the corner of Eastway, I think it's Eastway, and it starts with a K. Yeah, I was going to say Kilburn, exactly. Beautiful property, and all of those are affordable housing units. But 75 of those units are reserved for folks that probably are not going to be able to maybe $200 a month, are able to 75 of those units, but all of those units are locked into affordable rental numbers for the foreseeable future. So we're really excited about that. But again, all of those units are affordable. And you see the NOAA, naturally occurring affordable housing, and that's what that's one of the challenges to affordable housing in this community, is preserving our naturally occurring affordable housing. Those older properties that are being bought up, and I'm seeing a lot of nodding heads, you know what's happening, and they're being bought up, and you put in a nice granite countertop and raise the rent $200 or $300, and friends of mine are saying that, so that their rent is going up and becoming very unaffordable. So we're trying to, that's going to be one of the keys. Next slide. So again, from our perspective, very quickly, disappearing, those older properties that are quickly disappearing, that are being purchased, that will never, and once a NOAA is gone, it's gone. Preventing evictions, and how can we creatively assist people in getting through a difficult period so that they're not evicted, or getting the proper representation so they're not evicted, or they're not the victim of informal evictions. And there's a lot we could talk about there. Uses of rental subsidy, and Liz has talked, and we'll talk more about that, about the voucher system and how our rental prices are rising so quickly that actually our vouchers are not even able to keep up with how our rents are rising. And lastly, a critical need is just a failure of imagination. We need to imagine the ways in which we can adapt and reuse properties that are already out there, and create something different, a living space for folks that would really enjoy that kind of space to live in. And I believe that's all I've got. Thank you so much. Again, looking forward to the year ahead.
All right, so Joe will be joining us over and over again. Thank you, Joe.
Is that a threat?
So while our lived expertise panel comes up and has a seat up here, and I think we have a mic that you all are going to share, I just want to invite them up to get situated up here at the front. And then what I want to make sure to just talk about for a few minutes as they're coming up is we spend a lot of time at this congregation serving, right? We serve people in need within and outside of our congregation. That's what we do. That's a lot of what drew us, keeps us at Caldwell. It's also important sometimes to take a step back and to also think about the expertise in the people we're serving. And that is a different power arrangement, right? When you're helping someone, that's a type of power arrangement. Typically, you, the helper, have more power than the person you're helping. When we look to people with lived experience, which I also like to call lived expertise, it means we're changing that power dynamic. And we're saying, what can you teach us? And to me, that piece is as important in this journey as is the helping that we're going to do along the way, right? And so I'm just so honored to have you all here with us today. I'm just going to take a point of privilege to say that I've gotten to know all of these folks over the years. Mr. Coleman, you might not know, but behind the scenes, he was one of the first people to contribute to the Housing First Charlotte-Mecklenburg study, because I went to people with lived experience and talked about what we were doing and the questions that we were asking and got feedback. Tabby Burns and James Searcy, I got to know through Helping Homeless, which was an advocacy organization started at, you can even, Urban, yeah, that's right, by Liz Clayson Kelly years ago. And so I've had the privilege of learning from these folks. So when Joe says he knows less than me, I don't believe it. I think there's a huge need for humility in this work. None of us know it. I'm blown away by what I don't know in the housing space every day. I mean, figuring out this balance between creating a bunch of new housing, using developers that we also get angry at, gosh, it's hard to tease that apart. But we have to have humility about how we do this, and I have learned so much from the people here, from people who are on the front lines, and I think we need to set ourselves up over this next year to do the same. So thank you all so much for being with us. So I'm going to start with just a quick question of maybe introducing yourself and the expertise that you bring to the table. And if you can almost act like you're going to swallow the microphone, put it really close to your face. Yes,
Well, good evening, afternoon, everybody. My name is Mr. Coleman Eugene, and I am one person that is truly grateful to be sitting here and being able to address people, because I have a great big fat thank you for everybody. Thank you for being there for me when I was down and out. Thank you for being there when I didn't have any hope left for myself. I really just gave up on life and didn't think I would make it this far. Had no idea I would make it this far. Really, truthfully, I thought I would be long gone before now. But thanks to people like Mr. Joe, Ms. Laura, Ms. Thomas here, they gave me hope, and I would like to say to you all, please don't you dare give up. Ms. Thomas knew me when I first got back into my first apartment anyway, and that's been some, I would say, a little better than 10 years.
okay.
And to you all, I would like to say that it's working, so please don't give up. Thank you for being who you are.
Put it real close.
Okay, I'm gonna do it this way. I'm gonna stand up because I'm having trouble with this chair. Hi, y'all. My name is Tabby Burns. Actually, my real name is Todd Allison Burns, but Tabby is what everybody calls me because they feel more comfortable with it. And it doesn't bother me because it makes me smile. And oh, we're not close enough yet. But for me, I was homeless for like 15 years, 17 years, somewhere around in there. And I went through a lot of things. And me being a female, being on my own, and I'm proud of myself having this ability to be kind to people, to smile and say hello, and try to treat everybody with respect like I want. And for me, yes, I'm very grateful to all that y'all do, all that y'all give us, all the prayers that you place upon us, and everything like that. And I personally, just as he did, I personally thank y'all, each and every one, for the smile that you give, for the question that you ask, the answers that you understand, and it makes everybody a little bit better and a little bit closer. Thank you.
Hello, my name is James Searcy. You have some information on the table about me, but I have a short testimony that I want to give first. For me to be sitting here is a calling. It's a calling to Caldwell. I've asked Lori a number of times, why did she send me that email last week?
2 weeks ago.
Yeah. 2 weeks ago, I received an email from Lori, and she asked, would I come here and would I be on this panel at Caldwell? Unknowing to her, just the word Caldwell was a yes. And the reason that the word Caldwell was a yes, are any people in here from Cedar Valley? Okay. Mary Carol Mitchell, George Mitchell, Bess Wells. In 1992, I was sentenced to 25 years in federal prison. Mary Carol Mitchell, Bess Wells, Cheryl Spinauer supported me for 17 years until my release. Upon my release, I came here. Until the pandemic, I would drive to Black Mountain once a month to see Mary Carol and George. So this is a calling for me. The seed was planted 17 years ago for me to be at Caldwell. I didn't know how, when, but God used Lori to call me to Caldwell. And I will be here until the doors of Esther's house opens. And as much as I can contribute. As you see on the paper, I was homeless in 2011 when I came home. I went through the men's shelter. I went through McCreek Place. I moved on. I've been on a number of boards with Mecklenburg County, doing street outreach. But Caldwell has an opportunity to build their own table for housing. You can look at all the data, you can look at all the other experiences, but this is an opportunity for Caldwell to do it right, completely right. You can learn from all the other things. And that's why we're here. So we have that lived experience. We've been through the process. And I can tell you that the process works. And the key part of the process is relationship. Each person that comes through the doors of Esther's house, we must have a relationship with them prior to them coming through the doors. Planting that seed of success. And we use the word permanent supportive housing. That's the word that they use, but we're looking further than that. We're looking for that person that comes through Esther's house, not to be permanent. We talk about home ownership, to move on for the next person. So these are some of the things that we can learn from past experiences. Just don't stop here. Let's go to home ownership or whatever you desire and make room for the next person to come through the door. And I really appreciate everyone in this room for being here. And thank you so much.
All right, so we've heard a little bit from James, thank you all, but about getting housing, and that's, I think, what I'd like to hear and maybe talk about a little next is, how did you find your housing, and what was that finding housing like for you? What was that experience of trying to find housing like for you?
Okay, for housing, for me finding housing, it was like, when I lived out in the streets and stuff, I would find abandoned houses, go in and clean one room up and have some place for me to lay down. I didn't do no damage, I made sure it was all nice and neat and everything. And one time a realtor came in and seen what I had done and told me, here, $75 to finish the rest. And I was like, cool, thank you. Got any more jobs? He said, no, but if you're sleeping in this house, you need to go to urban ministry. So that's where I went and talked to Megan the first time I met her. And she said, well, I don't know if we can, what we can do right now, but if you stay in contact, you know, we'll find something. Well, at the same time, I went through Inuvia, which is another door to learning. It's dyslexic and it's mental health. And it helped me out a lot, a whole lot. And I'm sorry to say that one of the people that helped teach me has passed away. And it did my heart really, you know, sore. But housing, when I talked to her, she said, go to Access for the Faculty of Mental Health. So I went to it, it was in the back of the men's shelter, in that building in the very back. That was where we went to see counselors and see some of the doctors with their mental health doctors and stuff. And they told me that this is a problem that I had, just like when I was in the shelter. I had money, I have Social Security. So I didn't have to worry about funds, I had the money. I told her, I said, I've done saved up $600. And that's what you told me I would probably need to move into, was with the $600. So I saved it, I kept it on me, didn't let it go nowhere, and then one day they told me to go to Access, because there was someone there that wanted to meet me. And I can't remember his last name, but John Yeager, I believe it was.
Yes.
God rest his soul.
Yes.
And he told me, he said, don't worry about no deposit. Don't worry about any money trying to get anything turned on, because where you're going to go, it's going to be all done for you. And I was like, cool. Wasn't open, they were still doing the final touches. But I was like, cool, we have a place soon. And so when he had a bad habit, he had a bad problem with me, I called him at least twice a week. Is it ready yet? Is it ready yet? He kept saying, yes, it's working on it. That's not, is it ready yet? And so he told me, he said, don't worry about it. I'll let you know when it's time for you to move in. Well, on February 1st is when they opened their doors. And I was one of the first people to come into Moore Place, into my apartment in room 219, with my little lock and key, and all the peace and quiet I wanted, or to go outside, because it's an enclosed building. So to go outside in the front, sit down there where it's nice and breezy and everything, or to come out of my apartment and go down and do one of the activities and stuff that they have for us. You know, there's a lot of times that because of the COVID, that a lot of things were canceled, and we're still working it out. And we love bingo, so if any of y'all want to set up a bingo thing, talk to Mr. Daniels, and he'll get it worked out. We love like bingo. Bingo's one of our favorite things. I can't help it, I like winning. We got this one guy that every time he wins every time. I mean, every time. And I said, how do you do that? He says, I ain't telling nobody. I'm in trouble. I said, okay, now what did you do? But he ended up being my best friend. He still lives there, so he's there. I had another friend named Carlotta. I am grateful for her success. Okay, she was working, she just got on Social Security because she had unemployment and stuff. So they took care of all that for her. Then they pulled her off the unemployment, put her on Social Security for 2 months. And during that 2 months, she found a job to work at Amazon. And they wanted to keep giving her more hours, but you can only work so long if you're on Social Security. And for her to have the success of being able to get that job, 3 months later, find a house that had room for her mother, her 3 kids, and herself. And she works to this day, still, not at Nubia, I mean, not Amazon. She works at Walmart, out off Ashley Road and stuff, out that way. And she likes it. She says she's happy with it. So she said it's odd hours. She might be working first shift one day, and then night shift the next, and then mid shift, and it's driving me crazy. I said, well, at least it ain't Michael driving you crazy. He was something else. But for me, when I walked in that room, in that apartment, my heart just melted away. I was so happy, excuse me. I was so happy to be able to say, this is mine. This is what I have. By the grace of God, by the long, honest, hard work that I had to go through. I am 13 years clean and sober. I am 12 years nicotine free. And I didn't go to any class except for Anuvia, which I paid for out of my insurance to go there. So there was no other things that I needed to go through or anything like that. So they helped me get on the road that I needed. I was put in a waiting, what they call one of them little room places. The house had separate rooms you just sit in, live in and stuff. I was grateful to be put someplace where I was safe and not have to worry about the drugs and the alcohol. Unfortunately, I'm still around it because it's pretty much everywhere you go. I mean, you might be able to drive by it, you might be able to walk a different direction, but at some point in time, you're going to realize it's still there. And you've either got to be strong enough to say, hey, how you doing? You doing all right? Can I get you anything? But giving you strong advice, don't hand nobody no money. You go and buy it for them and take it back to them. Unless it's alcohol and you don't want to do it, that's understandable. Because a lot of people don't like buying alcohol for other people. I don't either. And I mean, I used to drink. So if you're going to do it like I said. You do it. You buy it. You go out to the grocery store, because this lady told me I had to have my seizure medicine, and she literally went to the pharmacy, bought and paid for it out of her pocket, brought it back to me, and handed me a $50 bill and told me, go get something to eat, go find some place to stay tonight. Whatever you do with it, you just can't do drugs. And unfortunately, I wasn't strong enough at that point in time to say, okay, I'm not going to get no drugs. I did get drugs. I'm not lying, I did. And it made me feel bad. But I could go on for hours about telling you some of the incidents.
We're going to have you back, Tabby. You don't have to.
Oh, I got plenty. So I'm going to turn this over to you. Thank y'all.
My story is a little bit different from how I first became homeless. I have this time next week, probably won't be enough time to take it, or maybe it's shorter if we can. Back some years ago, I worked with a company. I've been at that company a total of 13 years and was raising a family. And one day, tragedy struck. My oldest son loved his dad so much, he just tried to be so much like his dad. He wound up losing his life behind him. So that was the beginning of my downfall. After that, you know, I couldn't comprehend. Just couldn't handle with that, the passion of his death. And with that being said, I also was having problems with the company that I was with. I've been working there for about 13 years, and I was feeling pressure from that as well. I had this little cyst that was on my shoulder that was continuing to grow, and my boss man was constantly on my butt about doing something about it, because they was getting worried about whether or not what effect it was having on my health. So I kept promising that I was going to have something to do about it. But every time the surgery time came along, I was so afraid of doctors. I would wind up making some kind of excuse not to go. So this cyst, what they call a palm, proceeded to grow, and it got as large as my head. That's how big it had got. I mean, my clothes actually looked like I was hanging on clothes. So I promised my employer noon of the time that I was going to get it removed until it came to the point where they threatened my job. You know, if I didn't do something about it, that they could no longer employ me. So, it came to the point where I wound up losing the job. But I wasn't going to the doctor. That was, other reason I had fear of the doctors. So I wound up becoming homeless, and with the pressure of that, and the pressure of losing my oldest son, I kind of gave up on life. And I turned to drugs, you know what goes with that. And I wound up living under bridges, old abandoned houses, you name it, I was there. And I was at the point where I didn't care whether I lived or died that way, because to me, the loss of my son, I really didn't have a desire to live. So, anyway, in my drug addiction, I started to see things that I never even thought about, by being around other homeless people that didn't have places to go, and over the years, experiencing their suffering as well. And so, somewhere, not that good with date, about 10 years ago, I was laying up under this bridge, up on the pillow, and a guy came walking down the tracks, and he said, hey buddy, he said, you got a cigarette? I said, nah, I sure don't. Just like that, He said, all right then. He said, I guess I'm gonna go on. He said, I'm heading to Atlanta. Now, this bridge that I was staying up under was a train crossing. And he said, well, I see you. I said, okay, I see you, buddy. He walked on down the track, and then we heard this train horn blowing, so we know the train was coming. And I said, well, I hope he caught it, because he come through at a slow pace. I guess maybe 15, 20 minutes later, a gentleman come over the top of the bridge, and he was in quite a bit of a hurry, and he got down to the bottom and started running down the track. So we went down and we looked down the tracks. That gentleman that had just passed me, was talking to me, had lost his life, trying to get on that way. So I didn't want to die as bad as I thought I did. That night, I got to thinking, and I said to myself, well, I looked up at the heavens and I said, Lord, can you help me? I said, Lord, can you help me? I really don't want to die like this. Thank you. So, and I said those few words, and I said them from my heart. So, make a long story short, every ministry had been my lifeline for a long time. So this particular morning when I walked down there, I met this lady, and something told me, said, go to that lady and ask her for help. And I did. And she looked me right in my eyes, and she said, look, she said, if you want my help, you got to be honest with me. Just like that. I said, well, I'll be as honest as possible. So she said, are you doing any drugs? I said, yeah, I am. Just like that. She she said, are you willing to get help with those drugs? I thought for a second and I said, yeah, which at that time I had no intentions of leaving drugs alone. So she said, we have a program that's called SABRE. And she says it's a 9-month program. She said, would you be willing to get into that program? And at the time I said yes, which I really didn't intend to. So she said, okay. She said, give me a couple of days and get back with me. And sure enough, she did. She got me enrolled into the SABRE program. But all the time, I'm saying to myself, that other little man on this shoulder is saying, nah, yeah, you don't need that. You don't need that. And then all the time on this shoulder, I'm saying, no, I don't want to die like that, I'm tired of this, There's got to be something better for me to do. So I agreed, and I went to the SABRE program. And I stayed in that program for 9 months. And shortly after I got out of the program, after studying the drugs and stuff, knowing the effect that it had on me and how it was robbing me from my good thoughts, I started to see things just a little bit different by just taking that little break for those 9 months. So after that, I think that's when I first went into housing, For the first 6 months after that, I could not sleep in that house. I slept out on my balcony. Couldn't sleep in the bed. Didn't sleep in the bed for about a year or so. But I just got so used to being outside, that's what it took for me to get that used to being back in housing. But, like I say, to make a long story short, during the 9 months that I was into that program, I started to see life in a different way. I started to meet people that I thought that really, I thought nobody cared really. But after giving myself the opportunity to have an open mind again and meeting people that would meet me and greet me with lots of hugs. Just sometimes just saying, how you doing, could make a world of difference. And it makes me, it gave me the courage to start caring for myself again and looking at life in a different way and seeing my old ways, seeing my wrong ways. And that was one of the things that's most important, because it wasn't necessarily my way, it was the right way. And my way wasn't the right way. So once I realized that, then things started to get a little bit better, a little bit better, a little bit better. And I don't know, I guess around that time I was weighing maybe like 105 pounds. Like the hard wind would just blow me over. But recently, everybody, I'm kind of bouncing around here a little bit because I'm trying to make a long story short. Most of the people in my family, I have 12 family members, and they're not talking about them because they all little angels. But think about a herd of elephants. There's nobody in my family weigh under 300. And with that, well, what I'm saying is there was a lot of problems there with heart attacks, stuff like that. So I always say to myself, that's not going to happen to me. So I went out of my way to stay skinny. It's possible, but I found out that's just not necessarily the case either. But recently, I've learned that my blood pressure is really, really high. So that was one of the reasons you saw me eating so scarce tonight. So I'm trying to watch that so that my dream may one day come true. I can go from being homeless to a homeowner. That's my dream. I may not make it, but if I keep hanging around folks like yourself, I think I'm gonna make it. So, for you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm mindful of the time, and so what I'm going to ask is, just briefly in closing, if you would give, if you might offer some suggestions, or maybe one suggestion, that you would have for us as we, the folks who may or may not have lived experience, any kind of suggestion or advice that you'd offer us as we get ready to turn that building into 18 apartments for folks who are formerly homeless. So we'd love to hear your thoughts, just quickly, and then what we'll do is we'll pray, and if anybody wants to ask questions of folks, we can stick around and ask some more questions. And so, but if you just give a word of advice.
As I think I said in the beginning, the key to success is just going to be relationship, building that relationship, listening to the residents, relationship and listening, and that will open up a lot of doors for success for Esther's house and for the residents of that place.
Okay, like I told y'all earlier, if you want to do something for someone, buy it for them and then give it to them. Because that's where we get the sandwiches that are being made by the children in school in the first second. They'll take an afternoon off, make a whole bunch of sandwiches, and they'll bring it over the next day to the soup kitchen for them to be able to give it out. And another thing is that if you're worried about someone walking up to you, just say good morning and how's Jesus with you, and start that. And 9 times out of 10, if somebody stands there and they want to continue that conversation, that's a good hope. It's a good hope. That's a good place to start praying.
Well, I thought you just about said it all. Well, but I would recommend love without conviction. Everyone deserves a second chance.
That's right.
Thank you. So, John, do you think we need to go ahead and close out, or can we take a couple of questions? Okay, 2 questions. And I'll just
First, I just want to thank you, James and Tabby and Mr. Coleman, for sharing your stories with us. It's really helpful. Tabby, you said you were on the streets for 15, 17 years and alone. And I just wondered if you would tell us what were the hardest things about that. Was it safety? Was it finding food? Was it finding a community? What? Being cold? And what was it?
Thank you.
Okay, when I said I'd been out there homeless for 15 to 17 years and I was alone, basically the main thing that scared me the most was the ones that I didn't know and I couldn't get no feeling off of them. If you put me in a crowd of people, I can guarantee you that I can just about tell you which people, just by walking up to them and greeting them, what kind of help they're going to get, give, or try to take. For me, one of the worst things is being a female, being alone. I hate to say it, but I was raped 3 different times. One of the times put me in the hospital. And so be careful. Don't do anything alone. Always have a partner with you. Because if you walk out there alone, then you're walking in a place you don't need to be.
Thank you, Tabby. All right, thank you all so much. We will have you back as we focus in more on this work and get closer, but we've already learned so much. John, do you have words in closing?
Well, I think we all realize in so many ways, on so many days, how God blesses this place with particular abundance. And I present to you Dr. Laurie Thomas as part of our abundance. We are grateful to have you three with us, and your words will carry us through the days. We've been working toward this dream for 10 years, so any encouragement you can give us to keep going is actually, you have no idea, that's a balm in Gilead for us. While we have been attentively taking in this valuable witness, we've had elves feed us and clean up after us. Please clean your tabletops of paper. If it just maybe put all the pins on just one table. Let's minimize what other people have to do. Donna Willis got here at 9:30 this morning, and she's got a aching back. So let's make quick work of this. You don't need to remake the room; it's fine. But let's just clean up, grab your plates, and then in March we're not going to have a workshop. We're going to have a listening session, a feedback session. Just how are we doing? How are we learning? How's this coming in? You know, and then in the second quarter, we'll have 2 more workshops and more books. Do read the deck that Laurie will send out. There are podcasts and wonderful things on there that we can continue to learn. Profoundly grateful to Jeff Cowden, who came early this morning as well and has made it certain that we've recorded this. So not only we can refer back to it, but when we get done, we're going to have an entire set of programs available to other churches to learn these things. And so Jeff's role, giving Justin a day off today, is profoundly appreciated. Next time we have one of these workshops, do raise your hand or see what you can do to help kind of clean up. It's one thing for us to be able to listen, and let's return the favor to the people that have taken that task on, and let's do it next time. That's all I've got, except again to Joe and to Laurie, to our panel, and to God Almighty. Let's don't quit was the word we got. Thank you.